One of the main discoveries of the historical Buddha was this notion that you could take the phenomenon of limited suffering self and analyze it into its components, and as the result of that, your identification with the limited suffering self would be broken, and the sense that there ever even was a limiting suffering self evaporates. In early Buddhism, there were a number of ways of sort of chopping up the pie. The 5 aggregates of clinging, if we were to put into a more contemporary vocabulary, would probably be something like the 5 things people tend to identify with. So what do we identify with? Rupa, the physical body. Vedana. You can interpret the Pali word Vedana broad or narrow. You can interpret it as applying to any and all sensory experience, just body or just body sensation. But I would say, however you interpret it, the thing that really gets us are the emotional pleasures and pains. It's hard, but you can learn to accept physical pain in the body. People learn to do this. But how many people can have an arising of terror or grief or rage in their body, and it's just not, it doesn't get them, okay? That's really, really hard, even though it's just body sensation. They're much harder to have a complete experience of. Why? Because what I call feel, you know, all know my definition of feel, body sensation that seems to a given individual at a given time to be emotional in nature. Those are sensations that have been honed by the evolutionary process to be an internal reward and punishment system to control us robotically. So it's really, really hard to have a complete experience of feel, but it's well worth it. Okay, so Rupa, Vedana, Sanya. Sanya means concept. It means thinking. But concept is very conceptual. I like to deal with thinking in terms that it's a sensory event, image talk. Now you might say, but what about the unconscious? Well, when you develop a sensitivity to where images arise, most of you have had this experience. At some point, the surface images don't arise, but you're aware there's some activity down there, a lot of activity. That's subconscious visual thinking. You develop a sensitivity to where you can hear internal talk. At some point, you don't hear the words anymore, but there's a rumbling of 1,000 voices down there. That's subconscious auditory thinking. So you can directly experience and monitor the subconscious by using the categories image space and talk space, even if there's no explicit image activity or talk activity. So that's at least one level of the subconscious. Then there's this thing called samskara in Sanskrit, or sankhara in Pali. It's a plural, actually, sankharas. That's the deep unconscious mind where the habit patterns are stored. One way to get that in contact with those very deep levels that you can't directly observe, they're below even the subtle feel, image, talk, they're like way, way down there, is you sort of look at your subpersonalities, or you look at your habitual modes. I mean, you know, I've got certain, you know, certain grooves that I just fall into, right? There's like, okay, let's entertain ourselves with mathematics groove, okay? That's one of my grooves. There's, okay, let's run a sexual fantasy groove. okay? That's another one, you know, if I don't do one, I do the other. Then there's, okay, I gotta like do some writing because I'm a meditation teacher and I gotta sort of do, okay, and that's like another groove, okay? Gotta work with students groove, okay? It's like call people, see how their practice is going. That's a lot easier than sit down and write texts and articles, and that's a hard groove, okay? It's like somebody calls and they're in crisis and they got 3 hours. Wow, that's great. I'm totally up for it. Because I know what the probable results are, and it doesn't really take that much effort on my part. It's an algorithm. I see the whole chess game in front of me, 12 moves ahead, years and years and years of practice. So when subpersonalities or these like major sort of habit patterns come up, I can sense this cone that's going down deep, deep, deep into my subconscious. It broadens as it goes down, and it's accessing all that previous conditioning, and the tip of it is coming up as this sensory event of this pattern. So it's just space simultaneously expanding and contracting. If I can experience it that way, then I can break the identification. Then there's Vijnana, or Vijnana in Pali. That means consciousness. I don't know what consciousness is, but I can tell you in traditional Buddhism it comes in 6 flavors: hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and body sensation. In my system, it's touch, sight, sound, feeling, which talk, relaxation, light, silence, peace, blank, quiet. Those are the flavors, okay? I don't know what consciousness is, but it comes in those flavors. But we can also consider it in its vanilla form, with independent of flavor. When we consider it independent of flavor, then we call it consciousness. In the traditional Buddhist formulation, consciousness is no more spiritual than your material body. What's spiritual is zero, okay? The material body is called rupa, and the other 4 aggregates are collectively called nama. Nirvana is explicitly defined as beyond nama rupa. That's where I was thinking of that story. There's the monk who is pretty enlightened, gone pretty far, and he is having a conversation with his master, and it gets late into the night, and so it's time to go back to his room, and so of course they didn't have flashlights in those days. He's got this candle, and he steps out of the room. Now remember, he's pretty enlightened, but he's not quite there yet, and it's the job of the Roshi to point him to what's the next step. Okay, and he steps out of the room, and the minute he steps out of the room, the Roshi goes, blows out the candle, and there's nothing but darkness. Okay? That's the last little holding on to identification with consciousness itself. Gotta let the light go out. Definitely do not rage against the fading of the light. Let it happen. Don't worry, it'll come right back.